Gravity was supposed to be our executioner. The hellfire raining from the pitch-black sky was meant to be our funeral pyre, but as the abyss swallowed us whole, I learned a terrifying truth. The most dangerous thing in the dark was not the fall. It was the beast holding me. Chapter 4. The world was a blinding, chaotic blur of rushing wind and descending fire. Nox did not look at the flaming projectiles hurtling toward us. His glowing crimson eyes remained locked entirely on mine, burning with an impossible, awestruck smile. The Alpha King had finally heard my voice. For a singular devastating heartbeat, the war, the betrayal, and the lethal drop ceased to exist. Then, the beast took over. He violently twisted our falling bodies. The movement was a brutal, fracturing shift of gravity that made my stomach lurch into my throat. He buried my face deep into the crook of his neck, wrapping his colossal frame around my fragile one. He became a living shield of scarred muscle and unbreakable bone. He turned his broad, vulnerable back to the sky. The hellfire hit him. I heard the sickening, muffled thuds of heavy, steel-piercing flesh. I felt the violent jolts travel through his imposing body with every arrow that found its mark. The scent of burning pitch, charred fabric, and scorched royal blood instantly overpowered the freezing air. Nox released a guttural, tearing groan against my hair, but his iron grip on me did not loosen, not even a microscopic fraction. He was taking the agonizing death that was meant for me. Then, the howling abyss ended. We did not hit jagged rock. We hit water. It was a violent, crushing impact that knocked the absolute last sliver of oxygen from my lungs. The subterranean river was a glacial, unforgiving nightmare. The freezing current grabbed us like a massive hand, violently tumbling us through the pitch-black depths. The shock of the cold paralyzed my limbs. I was drowning. My lungs screamed for air, burning with the overwhelming instinct to inhale the black water. But Nox's arms remained an absolute, unbreakable anchor. Even bleeding out into the freezing river, his primal instinct to protect his mate completely overrode death itself. His powerful legs kicked. He fought the vicious undercurrent, dragging us upward through sheer inhuman willpower. We broke the surface. I gasped, violently choking on the damp, freezing air. Nox dragged us onto a jagged shore, his breathing a wet, agonizing rattle. We collapsed onto the hard, unhewn stone of a hidden subterranean cavern. Total darkness consumed us. I lay shivering violently on the freezing rock. My trembling fingers frantically traced the muscular planes of his chest. He was completely still. The terrifying, thunderous rhythm of his heart, thump, 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 was barely a ghostly whisper against my palm. Nox, I tried to speak. My voice was a broken, raspy croak. It sounded like fractured glass grinding together. The ancient curse was gone, but 10 long years of absolute silence had left my vocal cords raw, bleeding, and weak. Alpha! The frantic shout echoed off the damp cavern walls. A harsh, flickering torchlight suddenly illuminated the gloom, slicing through the thick shadows. Beta Jet sprinted across the jagged rocks. His usual sarcastic, arrogant demeanor was completely obliterated by pure panic. Behind him, moving with surprising speed, was High Priestess Veda. Her pale, blind eyes were wide with terror. They had taken the secret, winding water tunnels beneath the cliff, desperately searching for the shattered remains of their king. Jet slid to his knees beside Nox. The fierce warrior let out a choked, horrified breath. 4 thick, black-fletched arrows protruded deeply from the king's back. The skin around the wounds was charred, bubbling, and blistered from the pitch. The Alpha was bleeding out on the cavern floor, his dominant life force pooling darkly onto the stone. "Help him," I rasped, my voice cracking violently. "Please." Veda froze. The High Priestess dropped her heavy wooden staff. It clattered loudly against the stone, the sound echoing sharply in the cavern. She did not look at the dying king. Her milky, blind eyes were fixed entirely on me, or rather on the faint, pulsating, ethereal light radiating from the freshly broken seal on my throat. The pale silver crescent moon on my nape was glowing with a brilliant, undeniable luminescence in the suffocating dark. "The voice," Veda whispered, her frail body trembling violently under her heavy robes. I heard the shockwave. I felt the ancient, sovereign frequency. She fell to her knees, completely ignoring the pool of royal blood. She bowed her head until her wrinkled forehead pressed against the freezing, damp stone right before my bare, bleeding feet. "Siren Wolf," the priestess choked out, hot tears streaming down her face. "The Queen of Light has returned. Forgive us. Forgive our blind, pathetic ignorance." Jet's head snapped up. His sharp, calculating eyes darted from Veda's prostrate form to the glowing mark on my skin. The final piece of the devastating 10-year-old puzzle clicked into place. A harsh, agonizing cough racked Knox's chest. Black, poison blood spattered from his pale lips. The king's heavy eyelids fluttered open. His vision was hazy, swimming with the overwhelming agony of the venomous arrows. But through the dim, flickering torchlight, he saw his revered high priestess groveling at the feet of a battered servant. He saw the undeniable ancient magic radiating from my fractured soul. The truth hit him harder than the catastrophic fall from the cliff. Sloane's golden crown was a stolen, empty trinket. The true Luna, the sovereign power of the entire realm, had been scrubbing the mud from his castle floors. She had been beaten, starved, and humiliated under his roof, and he had almost let her die. "Wren," Knox breathed, my real name finally crossing his lips. It was a prayer. It was an absolute, devastating apology. The name tasted of blood and profound regret on his tongue. He did not stay on the ground. Defying every law of biology, the Alpha King forced his ruined, massive body upward. His towering muscles trembled violently under the strain. The poisoned arrow shifted inside his back, tearing a visceral, agonizing groan from his throat. "Sire, do not move," Jet barked, dropping his sword and reaching out to stabilize him. A terrifying, rumbling growl stopped the beta dead in his tracks. Knox was bleeding out, but his dominance remained absolute. He dragged himself across the freezing, unhewn stone. He did not rise to his feet. He refused to tower over me ever again. Instead, the most feared predator in the realm collapsed onto his knees. He bowed his head. His bloody, trembling hands reached out, hovering mere inches from my bruised knees. He was terrified to touch me. He was terrified his violent hands would completely shatter the fragile queen he had failed to protect. "I was blind," Knox rasped. His broad chest heaved with agonizing labor. "You were starving in the shadows of my own home. You were bleeding under the heel of a false idol, and I did nothing." A single drop of moisture cut a clean path down his soot-stained cheek. It was a staggering, world-altering sight. The Alpha King did not weep. He bled, he conquered, he destroyed. But here, in the damp dark of the subterranean world, he shattered. "Forgive me," he whispered, his deep voice fracturing into a broken rasp. "Let my miserable life be the payment for your silence." He swayed. The dark venom finally overwhelmed his colossal heart. He pitched forward into the freezing dark. I caught him. The impact sent a shock wave of pain through my battered arms, but I did not let go. I pulled his heavy, burning head directly into my lap. His breathing was a shallow, dying rattle. The intoxicating scent of dark pine and ozone was fading, rapidly being replaced by the metallic, suffocating stench of impending death. No, the refusal echoed in the very marrow of my bones. I did not survive a decade of torment just to watch my true mate die in the dark. The siren wolf magic humming in my veins was raw and untamed. It was a wild, celestial fire waking from a long, agonizing slumber. I closed my eyes. I pressed my small, pale palms against the charred, bleeding flesh of his back, right beside the embedded steel. I took a deep, expanding breath. My throat burned with the phantom memory of the 10-year curse. I ignored the agony. I parted my lips. I did not shout. I sang. It was a low, ancient hum. The melody was not composed of normal musical notes. It was the raw, untamed frequency of creation. It was the sound of moonlight filtering through a primordial forest, of heavy tides pulling against a jagged shore. My raspy, broken vocal cords transformed the song into something devastatingly beautiful. The cavern instantly lit up. A blinding, ethereal silver light erupted from my glowing nape and poured down my arms. The magic flowed from my palms directly into his ruined body. Nox gasped. His massive back arched violently against my lap. The healing was not gentle. It was a fierce, commanding exorcism of the dark poison. The silver light flooded his veins, hunting down the venom and incinerating it. The thick, steel-tipped arrows embedded in his flesh began to tremble. With a sickening shock, the ancient magic forcefully expelled the foreign objects. The bloody arrows clattered onto the stone floor. I kept humming. The melody grew stronger, bouncing off the damp cavern walls. The charred flesh beneath my hands began to rapidly knit back together. Muscle reattached. Skin smoothed over, leaving only faint silvery scars as permanent proof of his ultimate sacrifice. The mate pull flared into an absolute inferno. The connection snapped fully into place. It was a physical tether, a blinding golden cord binding our fractured souls. Nox inhaled sharply. The scent of ozone and thunderstorm roared back to life, filling the suffocating cavern with intoxicating, overwhelming power. His crimson eyes snapped open. The dying glaze was entirely gone. The feral, possessive fire had returned, burning hotter and darker than ever before. He pushed himself up. His healed muscles rippled under the torn remnants of his royal shirt. He did not pull away. He crowded into my space, trapping me between his burning chest and the cold cave wall. His large, calloused hands framed my face. He wiped a stray tear from my cheek with a trembling thumb. "My queen," he murmured. His voice was a dark, vibrating purr that sent liquid heat pooling directly in my core. "My beautiful, terrifying queen." He leaned in. His heavy, heated gaze dropped to my parted lips. The sexual tension between us was a suffocating gravitational force. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. I tilted my chin up, my breath hitching in desperate anticipation of his claim. A deafening, catastrophic roar shattered the moment. The entire cavern violently shook. Dust and jagged rocks rained down from the ceiling. The subterranean river beside us began to violently churn. The water rapidly turned a sickly, toxic black, hissing as it ate away at the stone shore. Jet sprinted back into the main chamber, his blackened steel sword drawn. The sarcastic, composed Beta was entirely gone. Pure, unfiltered panic twisted his sharp features. "Wang, we need to move, now!" Jet shouted over the deafening tremors. "Sloane has gone completely insane. She opened the lower gates. She unleashed the shadow hounds into the chasm." Nox instantly rose to his feet. He pulled me behind his broad back in a fiercely protective stance, his crimson eyes scanning the darkness. The river. Poisoned, Jet confirmed grimly, watching the black water bubble and smoke. Bane blood toxin. It will melt the flesh straight off our bones. The hounds are flooding the only exit above. We are entirely trapped. Chapter 5. The black water surged. It hissed against the jagged rocks, a rising tide of liquid death. Acrid smoke filled the cavern, burning my lungs with the agonizing scent of sulfur and rotting earth. The subterranean river was no longer a current. It was a hungry, venomous snake, expanding its coils. But the rising acid was not the true nightmare. The nightmare was the sound echoing down the only escape tunnel. It started as a low, wet scrambling, thousands of claws scraping violently against unhewn stone. Then came the snarling, a chorus of unnatural, guttural growls that vibrated in the marrow of my bones. The shadow hounds were descending. They were mindless, mutated beasts bred in the deepest, darkest pits of the castle's dungeons, fed exclusively on human terror and dark magic. Nox stepped directly in front of me. His broad shoulders completely blocked my view of the tunnel entrance. "Jet," the king commanded, his voice a subterranean rumble of absolute authority. "There is a vertical fissure behind the altar stone. It is narrow, but it leads to the surface. Take her." Jet's eyes widened. "Sire, the fissure is a dead end if the hounds breach this room. We fight together." "That is an order, Beta," Nox roared, the feral beast completely eclipsing his human restraint. "I will hold the choke point. I will rip them apart until the cavern collapses. You get my queen to the sky. Do not look back." He was doing it again. He was throwing his life away to be my shield. The colossal wolf beneath his skin was already clawing to get out, preparing for a suicidal, glorious final stand. I stared at his broad, scarred back. A sudden violent heat ignited in my chest. It was not fear. It was pure, unadulterated sovereignty. For 10 years I had hidden behind corners. I had bowed my head to survive, but the terrified, mute servant had died in the freezing wind above the canyon. I was the siren wolf. I was the apex. I reached out. My small, pale hand clamped firmly around Nox's thick forearm. The Alpha King froze. He looked back over his shoulder, his crimson eyes burning with desperate urgency. "Ren, you must go. Now." "No," I whispered. My voice was still rough, a raspy, fractured sound. But the tone was absolute. I pulled him backward. The sheer, kinetic force of the mate bond compelled him to yield. I stepped around his towering frame. I did not hide behind the king. I stepped onto the front line. "Won't, Ren," Nox growled, lunging forward to grab my waist. He was a fraction of a second too late. The tunnel entrance erupted. A tidal wave of absolute darkness spilled into the cavern. The shadow hounds were monstrosities of twisting smoke and rotting flesh, their eyes glowing like dying embers. Their jaws snapped, dripping with toxic black saliva. There were dozens of them, a chaotic, starving pack surging straight toward us. I planted my bare feet firmly on the stone. I drew a deep, expanding breath. The silver crescent moon on my nape flared with blinding, celestial brilliance. I opened my mouth and unleashed the death song. It was not a roar. It was a piercing, supersonic frequency of pure devastation. The sonic wave exploded from my lips, a visible ring of silver, kinetic force tearing through the damp air. The sound did not just strike the beasts, it invaded them. The front line of the shadow hounds hit the invisible wall of sound. Their forward momentum instantly shattered. The ancient magic in my voice was a frequency designed to dominate, to subjugate the corrupted. The hounds shrieked, a horrifying high-pitched cacophony. The kinetic blast violently scrambled their corrupted minds. They collapsed onto the stone, thrashing wildly. Then, the true horror of the Siren Wolf command took hold. The beasts stopped looking at me. Their glowing red eyes darted wildly, entirely consumed by the absolute madness induced by my song. The largest hound snapped its venomous jaws and lunged, not at us, but at the beast beside it. Chaos descended. The dark army violently turned on itself. They tore into each other with ruthless, feral frenzy, completely forgetting the Alpha King and his beta. Blood and black smoke filled the cavern as the pack decimated its own ranks under the crushing weight of my command. Behind me, the breath left Nox's lungs in a harsh, ragged gasp. He was not looking at the slaughter. He was looking at me. The blinding silver light reflecting off the cavern walls illuminated the pure, unadulterated worship in his crimson eyes. The colossal Alpha did not feel emasculated. He felt an overwhelming, soul-deep surge of pride. The beast inside him instantly bowed to its true master. I lowered my chin. My throat was burning, but the sovereign fire in my veins demanded more. I pointed toward the chaotic mass of beasts. "Clear the path," I rasped, my voice laced with heavy silver magic. Nox let out a blood-curdling demonic snarl. He did not hesitate. The king's bones violently shifted and cracked. In a blinding flash of dark energy, the colossal midnight wolf materialized. Beside him, Jet shifted into a sleek, iron-gray predator. They did not fight a desperate losing battle. Bolstered by my radiant aura, they became an unstoppable, synchronized force of execution. Nox was a hurricane of teeth and shadow. He launched himself into the remaining hounds, his immense jaws snapping spines with devastating precision. He tore through the corrupted flesh, his every movement a violent, beautiful tribute to the queen standing behind him. Jet guarded his flank, a deadly phantom in the gloom. Together we carved a path of absolute destruction through the subterranean dark, forcing our way up the jagged ascending tunnels until the damp air turned freezing and sharp. We burst through the fractured stone floor of the ancient ruins. We had reached the surface of the forbidden cliff. The sky above was a chaotic swirl of bruised purple and pitch black. The freezing wind whipped my tangled hair around my face. The castle guards had fled. The cliff was deserted except for one figure. Sloane stood in the center of an ancient, weathered sacrificial altar. Her golden gown was shredded, stained with soot and the blood from her ruptured ears. She looked entirely broken. The regal, arrogant noblewoman was gone, replaced by a hollow, deranged shell. She stared at us. She saw the colossal black wolf standing fiercely at my side, completely subservient to my silent command. She had lost everything: the crown, the Alpha, her sanity. Sloane threw her head back. She let out a shrieking, hysterical laugh that cut through the howling wind. It was the sound of a mind finally snapping in half. "You think you won?" she screamed, her eyes wide and unblinking. "You think you get to sit on my throne and play the happy little Luna?" From the ruined bodice of her dress, she pulled a jagged obsidian dagger. The blade was not silver. It was completely black, weeping a thick, oily substance. It was a bane blade, an artifact of forbidden cataclysmic sorcery. Nox snarled, his massive paws digging into the frost-covered stone, preparing to lunge and tear her apart. "If I cannot have the kingdom," Sloane shrieked, raising the cursed blade high above her head. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, suicidal malice. "Then you will all burn in the void with me." She did not throw the dagger. She plunged it violently into the side of her own neck. Dark, corrupted blood sprayed across the ancient altar. Sloane collapsed, her lifeless eyes staring up at the chaotic sky. The earth instantly convulsed. It was not an earthquake. It was a cosmic fracture. The sky directly above the blood-soaked altar tore open. A deafening apocalyptic tearing sound ruptured the atmosphere. Reality itself splintered. A pitch-black swirling vortex materialized in the air. It was an abyssal rift. The gate of hell had been torn wide open. A terrifying, inescapable gravitational force erupted from the void, instantly ripping the surrounding pine trees from their roots and sucking them into the absolute dark. Chapter 6. The world was ending. The abyssal rift was a gaping, jagged wound in the very fabric of reality. It did not merely pull, it consumed. The deafening, apocalyptic roar of the vortex drowned out the howling wind. Ancient stone pillars from the sacrificial altar were violently uprooted, sucked into the swirling, pitch-black void. The sky bled a chaotic, bruised purple, devoid of any stars. High Priestess Veda had somehow survived the treacherous ascent from the caverns. Her frail, trembling form clung to a jagged boulder, her blind eyes staring directly into the terrifying cosmic tear. "The gate!" Veda shrieked, her raspy voice barely piercing the catastrophic noise. Sloane's corrupted blood opened the void. It will swallow the entire kingdom. Nox shielded me with his imposing body. The king had shifted back to his human form, his powerful, scarred arms locked around my waist to anchor me against the crushing gravitational pull. "How do we close it?" he roared over the chaotic storm. "It requires a sacrifice of absolute dominance." Veda screamed back, hot tears of sheer terror streaming down her wrinkled face. "Only the life force, only the primal core of a true alpha can seal the abyss." The words hit me like a physical strike. My breath hitched violently. I looked up at the towering tyrant who had become my entire world in the span of a single, blood-soaked night. He was already looking at me. The feral, possessive fire in his crimson eyes had completely fractured. It melted into a devastating, profound sorrow. He knew. I knew. "No," I rasped, my throat painfully tight, my hands desperately gripping his broad shoulders. "Nox, no. We will fight it together. My voice. Your voice cannot command the void, little bird," he murmured. His tone was impossibly gentle, a stark, heartbreaking contrast to the violently tearing world around us. He did not give me time to argue. He did not give me time to draw a breath and use my siren command to stop him. He moved with blinding, desperate speed. His large, calloused hands framed my face, tilting my head to the side. The intoxicating scent of dark pine, electric ozone, and raw sorrow wrapped around me one final suffocating time. He leaned down. His warm lips brushed the frantically beating pulse at the base of my throat. Then his elongated canines pierced my flesh. I gasped. It was not a bite of violence. It was the absolute, irrevocable claim of the alpha. The marking. The sharp sting instantly dissolved into an overwhelming molten heat. The primal connection between us erupted into a blinding supernova. He was not just binding his fractured soul to mine. He was violently forcing his sovereign power, his undeniable authority, straight into my veins. He was making me the absolute ruler, to ensure no living creature would ever dare to hurt me again. The transfer of power was agonizing and breathtakingly beautiful. A rush of pure, golden energy flooded my soul, fortifying the silver siren magic already humming beneath my skin. I felt his towering strength. I felt his absolute, unwavering devotion. Then the devastating emptiness followed. He pulled back. Royal blood, crimson and bright, smeared his pale lips. The mate bond, which had just been forged in eternal fire, suddenly stretched agonizingly thin. Rule them well, my queen, Nox whispered. The words were a ghost against my flushed skin. He released me. The sudden loss of his physical anchor sent me stumbling backward onto the frost-covered stone. I reached out, my trembling fingers desperately brushing the torn fabric of his dark mantle. I caught nothing but thin air and a ripped strip of black fur. Nox turned toward the howling void. He did not look back. He did not hesitate. The Alpha King lunged forward. Mid-stride, his human form shattered. The colossal midnight wolf materialized in the bruised light, a magnificent, terrifying silhouette of pure sacrifice. He launched himself directly into the chaotic center of the abyssal rift. "Nox!" I screamed. My voice tore through the shattered sky, a devastating frequency of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. It was too late. The pitch-black vortex swallowed the great beast whole. A blinding, catastrophic explosion of white light erupted from the rift. The sheer kinetic shockwave threw me violently to the frozen ground. The deafening roar of the void was instantly silenced. The storm died. The bruised purple sky violently snapped back to a pale, quiet gray. Snow began to fall, soft and silent, blanketing the ruined, blood-stained altar. The gate of hell was entirely gone. I pushed myself onto my bruised knees. The biting cold was absolutely nothing compared to the crushing hollow void expanding rapidly in my chest. The world was utterly silent. I clutched the torn, blood-stained scrap of his mantle to my heavy heart. My tears fell, hot and fast, mixing with the royal blood still seeping from the eternal bite mark on my neck. Heavy, deliberate footsteps crunched on the frost behind me. I did not turn. I felt them. The alpha power now coursing through my human veins instantly recognized the absolute submission of the pack. Beta Jet stepped into the periphery of my vision. He dropped his blackened sword. Slowly, the cynical, arrogant warrior sank to both knees. He bowed his head until his forehead pressed against the frozen earth. Behind him, dozens of surviving wolves emerged from the shattered, blackened tree line. They followed suit, a silent, absolute surrender to their solitary, undeniable queen. I closed my eyes, entirely consumed by the agonizing grief. I had gained an entire kingdom and lost my soul in a single night. Then the freezing wind shifted. It was faint. It was impossibly distant, carrying the lingering faint scent of dark pine and electric ozone. From the deepest, unseen shadows of the canyon, a sound rose, a low, solitary, subterranean wolf howl. My eyes snapped open. Was it a cruel hallucination born of a fractured mind? Or was the monster still alive on the other side of the dark,